Unleash the power of knowledge and connect with the heartbeat of the African diaspora. Download our African Diaspora News Channel app now on Google Play and Apple App Store. Stay informed with authentic and diverse perspectives, breaking news, and cultural insights. Immerse yourself in a community that celebrates unity, resilience, and progress. Experience the vibrancy of the diaspora at your fingertips. Don't miss out. Empower your perspective today. Search African Diaspora News Channel and join the conversation.
Hello, African Diaspora News family. My name is Reneilwe Morema, and I am your host right here on the African Diaspora News Channel. I'm reporting live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Ugandan UN Judge Lydia Mugambe told police she had diplomatic immunity when they arrested her for keeping a woman as an unpaid servant in her Oxfordshire home. Mugambe tricked her victim into coming to the UK, forcing her to work without pay and threatening her when she resisted. Prosecutors said Lydia Mugambe took advantage of her status over her victim by preventing her from holding down a steady employment while forcing her to work as her maid and provide childcare for free. The 49-year-old, who is also a High Court judge in Uganda, was found guilty of conspiring to facilitate the commission of a breach of UK immigration law, facilitating travel with a view to exploitation, forcing someone to work, and conspiracy to intimidate a witness. She will be sentenced at Oxford Crown Court on May the 2nd. Her co-conspirator, Ugandan diplomat John Leonard Mugwera, has already fled back to Uganda.
So unfortunately, I'm going to have to now arrest you on suspicion of keeping somebody in slavery and servitude under the Modern Slavery Act. So you don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned, something which later on in court,
Officer,
anything you do say may be used as evidence. All right. Sorry?
I am a judge in my country. I even have immunity. I am not a criminal.
You've got immunity in this country?
Yes. I have a diplomatic passport.
You're a diplomat?
Yes.
So we'll need to see that then.
Yes.
And then we'll need to speak to the embassy if you are a diplomat.
I came here as a student. I don't need her to work for me. I didn't come with her. She asked me because she has worked at my home before.
An African keeping another African as their house slave in the UK. How ironic is that? Are people even surprised that these things are still happening though? I mean, Africans are still enslaved in Africa. More slaves today than any time in history. The Chinese come here and enslave Malawian kids, force them to work 17 hours straight at their clothing factory under hostile conditions. White farmers work their black employees to the bone and force them to sleep with pigs. There are so many foreign nationals that take advantage of the poor state of Africa and the African government's inability to provide basic services to its citizens. It breaks my heart that black people are also on that bandwagon of exploiting their own people. We truly are our worst enemies. And then she has the nerve to use her UN position to resist arrest as if she's above the law. No amount of degrees or positions can ever justify you being a horrible human being. I have immunity. I can't be arrested. I have immunity. Nonsense. A lot of these high position holders like judges, politicians, and businessmen always use their positions to avoid taking responsibility for their malicious crimes. They use big English jargons to confuse the masses on why they can't take responsibility for their crimes, and then the uneducated masses fail to smell bullshit from a mile away. Tell me why Ramaphosa was able to fly in the country with millions of dollars in cash that was unaccounted for. He stashed it under his mattress at his farmhouse, and it was business as usual. Why wasn't he brought to the Zondo commission or at least impeached? Anyway, the credibility of the United Nations has been significantly damaged by repeated scandals involving corruption, sexual abuse, and human trafficking. These crimes, often perpetrated by UN officials and peacekeepers, have eroded public trust, weakened the organization's moral authority, and fueled calls for reform. Here's how these incidents have impacted the UN's global standing. The UN presents itself as the global defender of human rights, anti-corruption efforts, and social justice, yet its own personnel have been implicated in some of the very crimes it condemns. Cases of UN peacekeepers sexually exploiting vulnerable women and children, UN officials engaging in bribery and money laundering, and even judges being convicted of modern-day slavery, directly contradicting the organization's core principles. This blatant hypocrisy has led to widespread cynicism, with many questioning whether the UN is truly committed to justice or merely a bureaucratic institution shielding its own. One of the biggest criticism of the UN is that its personnel rarely face consequences for their crimes. Many UN officials and peacekeepers operate under diplomatic immunity, which means they cannot be prosecuted in the countries whereby they commit crimes. Even in cases where the UN investigates a wrongdoing, punishments are often light or non-existent, with accused individuals being quietly reassigned or dismissed instead of being tried in a court of law. This failure to hold its own members accountable has severely weakened the UN's credibility, as victims rarely receive justice. The sex abuse scandals involving UN peacekeepers in countries like Haiti, the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of Congo have tarnished the reputation of peacekeeping missions. While these missions are meant to protect civilians, many locals now see UN forces as predators rather than protectors. Reports of sexual exploitation, cover-ups, and a lack of oversight have made governments and citizens in conflict zones less willing to trust or cooperate with UN forces. In some cases, local authorities have demanded the withdrawal of UN troops, seeing them as a threat rather than a solution. How sad is that? The repeated exposure of corruption, human rights violation, and financial scandals within the UN has led to growing distrust among the global public. Many have argued that the UN has become inefficient, bureaucratic, and detached from real-world issues, serving the interests of elites rather than ordinary people. This has fueled calls for reform, with demands for greater transparency, stronger enforcement of laws against UN personnel, and the abolition of diplomatic immunity for serious crimes. Some countries and advocacy groups have even questioned whether the UN, in its current form, is still fit for purpose. Scandals have also affected the UN's funding and political influence. Countries like the United States, the UK, and others have threatened to reduce financial contribution in response to corruption and mismanagement of those funds. Politicians have used these scandals as evidence that the UN is wasteful and ineffective, leading to budget cuts and weakened authority. Also, countries accused of human rights abuses, such as China and Russia, have used UN scandals as a way to deflect criticism, arguing that the West is guilty of similar misconduct within its own institutions. As the UN's reputation declines, other international organizations and alliances are gaining influence. Groups like the BRICS coalition, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South African regional bodies like the African Union, ASEAN, and even private sector initiatives are increasingly taking on roles traditionally handled by the UN. This shift could lead to a world where the UN is sidelined in global decision-making, further reducing its credibility and influence in the world. I feel like it's time to close the chapter on the UN history. I feel like, to be honest, it's time to close that UN chapter, because now people are using it as a shield to commit crimes, enslaving people, sexual assault, and not doing what they're supposed to do, and living lavishly on funds meant to protect people. So I think it's time to close that chapter, ladies and gentlemen. Like I've said in a lot of my commentary right there, that I've stated these cases to you. I've stated what the UN has been doing and advocating, and its personnel degrading its moral compass. I feel like it's time to close that chapter because it's more dangerous for people to trust in the UN than to even trust in their own dangerous governments. What do you think about this segment? Comment to us in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and share the broadcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss these groundbreaking conversations right here on the African Diaspora.